Hey everybody, this is Robert with RC Archery, and today I've got 7 tips to help you hold steadier on target. Alright guys, so tip number 1 is going to be setting your feet and your stance to help you use the right muscles in your shoulder to steady up your shot. So I've talked about this a little bit in a past video that I've done, but I wanted to bring this in there. It's another important tip to look at, to have. So the way that I'm standing right now and addressing the camera, if I was to put my bow in my hand, this is exactly the angle that I'd use to be able to shoot at a target. So you can tell that my body is a little bit open. It's a little bit open to the target. My feet are a little bit open as well. I have more of a neutrally open stance. Basically the way that I do it is I stack my big toes. So if you were to look at your big toe on your back foot, it's going to be in front of the big toe on your little foot, but I try to stack them together to where they're lining up right at the knuckles of each other or a little bit higher. So somewhere in that area, that's where I try to do for kind of a beginning portion of it, and then you use that from there to do minor adjustments to get your natural center of target point of aim that you're going to use. But having a little bit of an open stance like this, it's going to put my arm moving a little bit laterally over to the right. So that's going to do a couple things. Obviously it takes it out of the string path, but what it allows me to do is use these muscles right along here in my shoulder, and then also use these muscles on my back right in here, and that's going to help you steady everything together. You're going to have muscles on the back side of your arm holding you, and you're also going to have muscles on the front side of your arm holding you as well. So that's going to help you avoid some of this lateral movement back and forth on target because you're going to have muscles engaged. Alright guys, so tip number 2 is going to be adjusting your draw length to find the right position of your shoulder out and in. So this is going to be a huge one on stability. Finding that correct shoulder positioning is what's going to help you with the up and down bobs on target. It's going to overall make you steadier, but you'll see the biggest gains from the up and down. So what do I mean by that? Well, what we're looking at here is adjusting the draw length to where you have your arm further out with the shoulder further out or further back in. You don't want to go too far back in, and you don't want to go too far out, because it's going to break down the stability in both directions. What you're looking for is the correct position of the shoulder joint to be able to use the joint to your benefit, to be able to line everything up and hold everything in place. And also what you're looking for is the shoulder, the joint and the bone rather, all this here is going to line up more with your hips, and it's going to use this muscle here on the side of your body and in your back. That's going to give you a lot of stability. It's going to also help you use the correct muscles to help you hold steadier longer, to where you're not using small muscles that break down. So basically what you're, 2 things you're looking for and what you want to do. We always want to have a low shoulder, meaning you want this flat line here. You don't want it bunched up where you feel the muscles coming back up into your neck. You want to have that down. You can actually still get a lot of movement even while it's down like that, based on the positioning of your shoulder blade closer to the spine or further away from the spine. And that's the movement that we're going to be adjusting for. We always want to have the low shoulder. We always want to have everything out. But I can go everywhere from 28.5 all the way down to 28.25 this way very comfortably, and find the correct measurement that's going to help me hold steadiest on my bow just by where I'm moving my shoulder blade. So back and forth like this. And that's what's going to help you find that correct positioning. Studying your float and seeing what it does. Alright, so tip number 3 is going to be adjusting your loop length to give you the right leverage over your shot. Now this does everything to control the back half of your body. It's how far back the shoulder is going to be able to come, how far back your shoulder blade is going to come back into your spine. That's what's going to help you steady up on your shot. You want that loop length to be long enough to where you can still get good connection on your face, but this back shoulder is down as level as possible and where everything can come around. That's what's going to help you lock your back muscles into place on your setup, and what's going to help you be steadier at full draw, because you're going to be able to have a continual pull against the bow, and that's going to help you keep your pin up on target and keep you steadiest. Alright, so tip number 4 is your grip. I've talked about this a lot before. It's still a very important factor. Beyond just how we grip the bow, so having your hand to where you're not crossing the lifeline and it follows that diagram like it's on my Instagram channel, you want to have a soft grip, and you don't want to be using a lot of tension in your shot. And the way you can actually tell if you're having that tension in your shot is just by watching your sight picture and even your front stabilizer if you have a long bar to be able to look at. If you see a lot of side to side wiggle and it's a very nervous, twitch or wiggle back and forth, that can mean that you have a little bit of tension being placed in that hand, and it's actually moving that grip and moving that riser back and forth in your actual hand that way. So that's something to take a look at whenever you're looking at holding Steadier on target. It's having a soft hand on target as well. Alright, so the number 5 tip is going to be how you weight your release. I get a lot of people that I work with that tell me I hold steadier with the thumb release than I do with the hinge. So why is that? What are we looking at here? Well, a lot of people adjust the hinge and they hold the pressure points in it incorrectly. A lot of people are so focused on not wanting to punch themselves in the face that they hold all this pressure on their index finger. And when you do that, because you're holding all that pressure in one spot, you're going to wiggle and you're going to wobble more on that release hand, and you see that directly in your sight picture. When you weight the middle finger or even the outside finger a little bit as well, spreading that weight out and holding that release more firmly in your hand and adjusting it slow enough to where you can have that rotation and movement to still be safe is going to help you slow your float down on target. It's also going to help you with a more cleaner release because you're spreading out some more of that tension. So what I would do and what I recommend is adjusting that hinge release to where you can pull back, and when you get steady on target and you go to anchor in, you can release that index finger and release that thumb and spread this tension out between the first and the middle finger here. And what that's going to do is allow you to hold a lot steadier on target because you're spreading that load out. The third finger, you want to have it engaged. The hardest part is trying to engage a muscle or trying to create a movement that wasn't there prior. So you want to have a little bit of tension, a little bit of pressure into that finger bed there, but the majority of it you want between the first 2 fingers. And then at that point, all you can do is start to incorporate that third finger into that release bed and think about focusing on increasing the tension that you feel against it on the finger bed and then on that release here. And what that'll do is it'll start to slowly rotate that release around because you're focusing on that third finger, and then it'll take some of that pressure off the index for you. Alright, so my number 6 tip is combining movements. We want the overall movement on what we do to be at the least amount as possible. When you induce too much movement in one area or another, then a lot of times you're going to be asking for inconsistencies because it's hard to replicate and hard to duplicate an extensive amount of movement. So when we look at that in our shot, we want to look at what's moving and what are we doing. Well, we're going to have to move something for our release to go off, whether that's manipulating with the hand or just pulling through the shot or whatever we're doing. So what I like to do is combine these two together. I have a little bit of a pull that I do that's gradual and slow. It's just a little bit of a slow and gradual increase, and then I'll manipulate the release with my hand. Now, whether that's focusing on the outside finger like I talked about prior, relaxing the index, curling a finger, whatever that may be, that's what you're going to have to find that suits you best. I do have some articles out about that. I also have some videos here on my YouTube channel about multiple ways to fire your release to be able to find the one that works best for you. But you want to combine that with a pull. And what you're doing is you're going to limit the movement that you need by manipulating the release with your hand, and you're also going to minimize the movement that you need by pulling by combining those two together, and it's going to make the overall movements less. You'll see that directly in the sight picture, less jitters, less movements, and less variance in that sight picture. Taking that one step further on my shot, actually incorporate a third factor to go together with it that also takes out a lot of movement. What I do with my shot is I have a little bit of a push towards target. That little bit of an induced push towards target is going to slow my sight pin down on the actual target face itself. And what it also does is as you're pushing, you're pulling the loop and pulling the string away from your face just slightly to where you're not losing contact, but it is moving it some. What that does is directly pulls the index finger portion of your hinge, it pulls it around. So as you're pulling and pushing away from that face and everything with your release, you're actually pulling the index without having to worry about it hanging up. So even if I'm just, all my tension is on my index here and I just barely have any tension on my middle finger, as I start to push out, you can see that that starts to rotate that release. So that's going to take a lot of the hanging on your index out of the equation, and it's also going to add a little bit of extra movement to where that's a little bit less that you have to do by manipulating with your hand and pulling back. Alright guys, so 7th and final tip is not over aiming. When you over aim, you start to tense up, and that's going to create a lot of problems that we've talked about eliminating throughout this video. So whenever you go to tense up, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to tense that bow hand up. You're going to see a nervous jitter. Then you're going to start pulling the shoulders up, because when we get nervous or when we focus or when we do too much, our tendencies as humans is to pull the shoulders up. And what that's doing is it's taking that stability out of this shoulder joint here that we worked on with our draw length setting, and also our lateral movement as well that we worked on with our stance. So we don't want to do that. Another thing is trying to control your aim. You're actually going to move your body more, because you're going to see that pin move off to the left, and then you're going to sit there and focus on trying to push it back right. Well, your brain already knows that it needs to go back right. It moved it left because it wanted to look at the middle of the target and make sure that the spot that you're aiming at is still there. It's human tendency. So when it moves to the left, it's verifying that it's still there. It'll move it back to the middle for you, and if you allow it to, it'll trip the shot when it goes back to the middle. If you overcorrect, you're moving it to the right. One of two things is either going to happen. One is it's going to fire as you're moving to the right, and you're going to see a huge right miss because you're swinging past the target. Or two, it's going to move to the right, and then you're going to realize that you went too far back to the right. You need to move it back to the left, and it's just going to create a vicious circle. So don't over aim and don't try to control the shot. Whenever I draw back on target, what I do is I put my pin or put my dot in the center of the target to begin with. I generate a little bit of push towards target so that I can see the pin and everything slow down. And at that point, all I do is just keep an eye on it as a reference, because I don't want to control it. And I'm just going to let my shot happen. So it's drawing back here, looking at the middle, placing the pin on it now. I acquire my peep, push a little bit towards the target, even out the pressure on my fingers, and then I'll start my actual shot execution and never worry about what I'm doing with the pin on target. And then keeping that arm up, keeping a good solid follow through, and watching what you're doing on target, that's what's going to help you have the best shots over and over again, because you're not controlling the outcome. You're allowing on the form work and all the stuff that we talked about in this video to be able to dictate what you see on target. Easy as that. Appreciate you watching today. Keep an eye out for some more videos coming out next week, and I'll see you soon.